Hey, what do you think? Did that make any sense?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I want to know more.
Well, dude, there's
Wow.
there's more. Well,
Seriously.
Well, yeah. You got to understand, the whole area down there was a cesspool of COINTELPRO, and COINTELPRO leftovers, and everybody was on government payroll and all kind of weird stuff going on, man. And that's where Chapman showed up. For what reason? I don't know.
Yeah. You guys had CIA and all that there, too? That whole connection that people keep talking about?
Well, Padermo, I believe, was CIA, and I spoke to another guy who's pretty much convinced he's CIA. He was at the Bay of Pigs. He's a Cuban exile. All those guys that age were, he had connections with the local cops in front of the Dakota, that's for sure. So there's a lot there. Yeah. Now, a lot of people claim that the Yippies, Tom Forcade, who, by the way, was a suicide. There's a whole situation there, too. See, the High Times magazine, a lot of people don't realize, was funded by Hustler Publications, Larry Flint Publications. And the deal they had was they would buy the magazines, the printed magazines from Tom Forcade, and then resell them. So Tom Forcade didn't have to worry about selling magazines. He had a certain number, 3 million magazines a month were purchased by Larry Flint.
Whoa.
Right, meaning a huge ton of cash was pumped. Yeah, and so there's a lot of speculation that Forcade and these guys were CIA, which I speculate it's possible because they were selling marijuana openly, with no kind of problems from the police when we were under surveillance 24 hours 7.
See.
There was an incident, too, where someone placed a bomb out in front of Yippie headquarters, and 2 cops, New York City cops, were injured by this bomb. And the Yippies didn't even come out and talk to the police. They made a statement through a window on a second floor. They just yelled down to the cops. Now, can you imagine if that happened today, that if a bomb went off in front of your house and you refused to come out, the cops would go rushing in there and burn the whole place down.
Yeah. Wow. So what do you know about the Weather Underground? Did you ever run into them?
There were guys.
Before your time?
Hey, you know what? We got Chris Wallace. Let's take him in, and we'll do a little. We'll add him to the group.
Are you're still recording?
Yeah. Let's do an after show. Hey, Chris, you there?
Good. Okay.
Well, yeah, Weather Underground. There were guys. Yeah, in that whole mix, there were guys who definitely. Hello? Yeah. Hey, what's up, dude?
Hey.
Yeah, I'm on with Ann. We're gonna do a little after show recording, so we're recording this.
Cool.
Now, she was just asking me if I ever ran into any kind of like Weather Underground guys, and there were some connections with Black Panthers and Black Vets for Social Justice. They were all like remnants of these guys. Were all over this Lower East Side cesspool, like you'd call it. So definitely, yeah, there were.
Yeah, that was Obama's crew there, Bill Ayers.
Yeah, Bill Ayers.
Yes.
Yeah. Bill Ayers was he was one of the Weather Underground. Yeah, but I think he went to Chicago. I don't think he had any kind of connection to New York City in those days.
Right. No. I was just I'm being funny.
Okay.
Yeah.
But no, Bill Ayers, famously resurfaced when recently just because of that. That
yeah.
I don't think there's no doubt in my mind that.
Robert.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, Robert Redford's doing a movie about them.
Yes.
The Weather Underground.
With the kid from the Transformers, Shia LaBeouf.
Oh, really?
Is that the one you're talking about?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the Redford one, right? Yeah.
That's the one. Yeah, that's the one. It might even be, it might be out, or it should be coming out probably this month, maybe, I think. It's pretty soon. It should be, it's either out or coming out shortly.
Yeah, it's...
Well, there was the
company you keep. It's called The Company You Keep.
That might have been out already.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I saw that movie.
Did you?
Yeah, it's a pretty good
movie.
movie.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
I
been
missed
out a while. Yeah, it's been out. Yeah.
Was it good?
I saw it, I think I bought it like on YouTube or something like that. I mean, I think I saw it on, that show, Share, create, one of those, sites we get movies.
Putlucker or one of those.
Yeah, right, one of those. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mega Share, I think it's called.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look for it then because I'm curious how they spin that. Was it good?
Yeah, it's a good movie. Yeah, but he's supposed to be like he was innocent and he wasn't involved. He was covering up for his ex-wife or some nonsense or something like that. So well, if you're gonna
Yeah, well, you know what they did? It's kind of like, remember when Robert De Niro did and Matt Damon did The Good Shepherd, and it was basically about the skull and bones and the origination of the CIA. And I think De Niro was supposed to be Wild Bill Donovan, and how they were working with British MI5, MI6, whatever, at the beginning. And they were somewhat accurate, but they kind of whitewashed it a little bit for Hollywood standards. I think it was similar to that. Like they told some truths. They showed them during the initiations at the beginning. Matt Damon's character is very young. And, they show them like mud wrestling and they're urinating on them. And, they do weird, ritualistic initiations. And, then he gets older and he doesn't kind of connection to his wife and he starts to get more and more distant. And then it starts to show how the mob ties in with the, with the whole, apparatus of the CIA. And when he has this one scene with Joe Pesci, and that famous line, and he says, we Italians have this, and, black people have this, and Jewish people have tradition. What do you people have? And he says, we have the United States of America, and the rest of you are just visiting.
Right.
Yeah, so they kind of told the truth, but it's, like, filtered a bit.
Yeah, that movie's a little slow, too. You couldn't really...
It was.
Yeah.
It was very boring. But you know what was accurate about it? It's how they throw people out of airplanes.
Right.
He throws his own son's fiancée out of the airplane. They were both spies that fell in love, and they would do that. That's pretty hardcore.
Well, wait a second. These guys in the Boston bombing, these FBI agents, didn't they just fall out of a helicopter, both of them?
Right.
Both of them fell out?
Yep.
Right, yeah.
Absolutely.
Tricky. Those doors are tricky, I guess.
Yeah, I know. They just both happen to be together again.
Yeah.
Slippery. It must be slippery, right?
Slippery when wet. Yeah, there was a banana peel. There was a Muslim banana peel on the helicopter.
But Ed, that was very interesting what you were saying, how you ran into... Did you say you ran into Madonna when she was waitressing?
Yeah, I think I did. Oh, now what happened was, I didn't know it was Madonna, but there was this girl who looked like Madonna, and she used to come down and she used to have sex with this guy. It was a pretty open sex kind of orgy kind of place going on all the time. And there was this guy from Georgia who I think he was a musician as well. And this girl would come around and see him, and she was a waitress over at CBGB's. But when CBGB's would empty out at night, because they had a closing time. We didn't have a closing time. At Studio 10, we were open 24 hours, and you could come in and smoke pot in the open and do whatever you want. Right. These other places closed down. They would all come filtering into our place.
Oh. So, yeah, and you know what? I think I just saw an interview or some little bio of hers, and it was a written article. And she mentioned, I believe it was working there, and she said that, she was talking about how she had been raped when she was in New York City, one of the times at knife point on the top of a building, and she said that how she had been, her apartment had been vandalized, burglarized, and they stole everything that was worth, anything, and then they still burglarized it again, and there was nothing in it to steal. And it was back in the news for some reason. I don't know why she was bringing it up. Maybe she's trying to, it was something to promote an album or something. But she mentioned, her time in New York City and how she was drawn there from, I believe it was Michigan. And, her backstory is pretty sketchy with, the mother and, her father. You never know anything about what happened with her mom. And to be as relevant as she still is and as influential as she still is, and I heard that she's cousins or distant cousins with Lady Gaga.
Well, yeah, Lady Gaga, she has the same kind of history, and one of her writing partners was pushed out of a window before she got famous.
That's right.
Yeah. And she's openly doing all kinds of blood rituals and stuff like that all over the place, man.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There was an article also today that said Miley Cyrus, the reason why she claims that she's acting out as much as she is, it's that she's trying to top Lady Gaga. So we can only imagine what she'll start doing now to top Lady Gaga. You know, with all the Lady Gaga actually hung herself on stage during, like, the American Music Awards. You know, like some real generic, not even a cable award show. You know, she hung herself and had fake blood, like, coming out of her stomach, and everybody just watched it and was like, yeah, that's artistic. You know what I mean? It was so over the top, ridiculous, and people were just like, okay. I mean, it speaks to the culture. It speaks to society at large, you know.
Yeah, the ritual they're doing in public, right now, it's just so, and even this thing with the Kardashians with their Christmas card, and they got the pyramid with the,
Yeah.
That?
How crazy is that?
That was the strangest Christmas card I've ever seen. If you could even call it that. I don't even know what the hell that was. It was purple. With, pillars and things and all kinds of stuff. I mean, it was just a hodgepodge of, it's something to be studied. I think they like to use that black and white motif a lot. You know, whether it's when their had the
checkerboard and
yes, and in the house.
Mm-hmm.
Now, who would have a house that nice and decorate it that garish? You know what I mean? I've been in some nice houses, and I've never seen anybody with giant black and white checkered flooring with a dual staircase. You know what I mean? Like, something doesn't ring.
It's in your face.
Yeah, it really is.
Well, they're all connected to the whole OJ thing,
Yes.
That's how they got famous, and with these sex tapes and stuff like that. And, OJ was alluded to have been dealing drugs when OJ was selling coke, which I think everyone knows, and him and Al Cowling, there's plenty of things about that. They were dealing with the two guys, the Larry Flint bodyguards that shot Roy Raiden.
Yeah, you were getting into that, and then what did you get cut off at? What point when you were speaking?
Oh, I don't remember. I thought because it's a tough story to tell the whole story and really give a context of what it was like. Yeah. Yeah,
I didn't know. I knew bits and pieces of how you had hung out with a lot of those people in that during that time period, but I didn't know a lot of the details that you were getting into at the end. And
one of the things is that the guys, it was really fascinated me because Dana Beal, his lawyer was Bill Kunstler, so I would see Bill Kunstler all the time. And then another guy was Jerry Lefcourt, who was Abby Hoffman's lawyer, and he was one of the lawyers around this whole group. And so I would meet these lawyers. Then later on, only a couple of years later that I got involved in these big mafia cases in Brooklyn when I was working in Brooklyn as a PI. And it was the same lawyers. These same lawyers, Kunstler and Kuby and Lefcourt, were working for these mafia guys too on Fourth Amendment. They would all do the Fourth Amendment work on it. But they weren't that out in the open, that they were doing these mafia cases.
It was Kuby and
Kuby and Kunstler.
Yeah.
Kuby and Kunstler had an office together.
That's right. Yeah. Wow.
And they were rich, man. Kunstler was loaded. Kunstler, he had a ton. He had a limousine, man, 24 hours. He had a pocket full of cash all the time.
What do you think with the whole, because the thread was with the John Lennon thing?
Yeah.
And I think the guest was a little bit reticent to go into things that he couldn't exactly nail down, but I think you were onto something when you said that you had met a different Chapman's with a different temperament.
Oh, yeah.
And the one that was what I saw was he did an interview with Larry King, and I don't know if it was directly after or some years later, but I don't know how they hooked it up either. But he was in his cell, and he was giving an account of what had happened, and he told it in the most matter-of-fact, way. And he said, basically, he got out, I fired, I placed the gun down, I got out my copy of The Catcher in the Rye, no. Didn't place the gun down. The doorman, he said, tackled me. He said, which was a brave thing to do. Mm. And then he said, to calm myself down and wait for the police to come, I sat down and pulled out my copy of The Catcher in the Rye. And Larry King just let that breeze right over. He didn't follow it up. He didn't ask, why did you pull out a copy of The Catcher in the Rye? Why did you, not shoot the doorman? Why did, you know what I mean? It was such a weird, matter-of-fact way that he told it. And then the sequence of events, it wasn't like he was nervous and firing haphazardly and, the bullet didn't, graze Yoko or, you know what I mean? It was such an odd retelling of the story, and he was so calm and matter-of-fact about it. And then, to say that he just then sat there, and then to say, oh, how brave of I believe he said it was the doorman that wrestled the gun out of his hand, because he said something to the effect of, he didn't know if it was still loaded or if I was, still going to keep shooting him. It was just so odd, and I suggest anyone who's interested in this, you can Google it and it will come up. I think it's the first search, or you can find it on YouTube. And I don't know if that's the guy that you might have met, but the guy that was in this interview is very subdued. His composure is very calm. His demeanor.
Well, the thing is, you got to understand, YIPPIE headquarters was a place where there were strange people there to begin with. Everyone there was a little weird, a little strange. Okay? Mm-hmm. But Chapman was so agitated and he made everyone so nervous that everyone left to the point where I would have left too. Okay? Mm-hmm. But I had to watch the door because it was 200 pounds of pot upstairs. Okay? So it was, you couldn't leave. There was a robbery there too. Some guys, there was another thing too. There was a robbery there too with a bunch of guys who came in. I wasn't there that night, but the way it was described, they came in with shotguns in military style. They were DEA agents or something. These are professional cops who came in there military style, commando style. Paramount. Was
it just a routine kind of shakedown thing, we know what's going on and we want to cut, or was it a straight up bust?
They had suspects involved because they know there was another couple who was kind of political types who left the door unlatched. We know that for a fact. But the guys who came in were mercenary types who were professionals.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. Mm.
And also too, a bomb went off in front. 2 cops get injured, and nothing happens. A.J. Weberman is taking hostages next door. Nothing happens. By the way, too, there was another thing too with Norman Mailer, which it was in the paper at the time, and we talked about it at the time, where he was involved in a big hashish smuggling thing, where the cops come busting in when he's standing around there near a ton of hash, okay, and they let him go because he says, "Oh, I'm doing research on a book," and the whole thing was and the whole thing was all squashed. That's it. It's over.
Wow, that's really something. That's interesting.
And you can't find anything on that now.
No, I was just going to say.
I've Googled it. I can't find it.
So it just disappeared.
Yeah. And also, pretty much, too, a lot of the stuff, disappeared. The stuff about the 2 cops, you can find a newspaper article, a scan of it, Mm-hmm. But otherwise, there's no stories, no accounting of it, of what happened, And
I think that's why this is so important, is because you remember it, and, you know what I mean, then now there is a record of it.
Right. Well, that's one of the things. Because I didn't start talking about this till the mid-'90s, okay? And this guy, Paul Gorish, who is an interesting character, I'm not accusing him of anything, okay? But he's an interesting character because he was a store detective who wanted to be a cop. And he used to hang around, and he became friends with Lennon. He signed a book and gave it to him. And Lennon knew who the guy was for sure. And he used to take pictures of, he calls himself a photographer, but the only person he ever took pictures of was John Lennon out in front of Dakota. And he befriended Chapman, and his whole story all these years has always been Chapman was a nice guy. We went out to dinner, blah, blah, blah. He met these girls. I introduced him to these other people who hung out. All this nice stuff. 2010, he comes out and says, and I confronted Chapman, and we had bad words, and then Chapman came back to me and apologized. And he totally changes his story.
Yes, I heard that.
Now, there's a process church connection to this guy, because after he takes this picture of Lennon and Chapman, he says in newspaper articles, oh, yeah, and I became a photographer. I fell into it because people like the Beach Boys came to me and wanted me to take pictures. And, you know, the Beach Boys and their connections with the process and
forget it.
Forget it, yeah.
Brian Wilson and all of them. Oh, yeah, that's right. Some people say that Manson thought he was in the wrong, he was, going in the wrong house, that's who he was trying to.
Right.
But definitely, yeah, he hung out with them, and he was mad that they stole his song. And, there's always some sort of process connection.
But there's also the connections, too, because Roman Polanski, whose wife was killed, Sharon Tate was killed by the Manson guys.
And he just happened to be out of town.
Right, well, yeah, but also, too, he filmed the movie. Rosemary's Baby was filmed in Dakota.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And I think it was Ramsey who said the book that he reached for in the movie was Magic in Theory and Practice or something.
And above the Kinsey book, the Kinsey Manual.
Oh, that's right. That's what it was.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. See, it all that they leave calling cards like. Wow. That was quite a scene. And everybody looks back at it with rose-colored glasses, and I think that's why you can kind of provide some context for it, because people think it was all peace and love, and it's. I don't know if there was a legitimate anti-war movement that they were trying to derail, and they used these kinds of people to give them a bad name. Kind of like they would, let's say, with 9/11 Truth people. They would, have provocateurs or people that will infiltrate it or go out and say outlandish things like things about holograms or whatever. I'm just throwing things out there. People might think that maybe there were holograms, but I'm saying, how they put people and insert them into legitimate, movements to make it look absurd to the outside, people that maybe haven't researched it as much. And I mean, what is your take on what was actually going on versus, how people look back on that, that era?
That's a good question because I was sincere, and I believe there were other people. I know when I met Al Sharpton back in those days, he was a really likable guy and he was a very sincere guy, and we were definitely on the same page. But I know later on, because I've run into him since then. That I think he was compromised, like you always hear Rawson talking about. I know that some things he was involved in some things with the ticket scalping, and these were allegations about what he was accused of. And there was a FBI tape of him negotiating a coke deal, okay, where he's wearing a cowboy hat. These are actual tapes that are out there.
Wow.
Yeah, and then we had a meeting. I ran into him at another occasion when he came into the PI's office. We were doing bug sweeps, and he had a bunch of guys came in and wanted us to sweep his offices for bugs. He never paid taxes, by the way. This is all stuff in the newspaper. His headquarters never paid taxes, and his headquarters never paid rent to their landlord. Their landlord was terrified of these guys, and they never collected rent from them. Then, so I believe he was compromised. Then there's an incredible story in the Village Voice you got to read, where the people who ran Al Sharpton's campaign when he was running for president in the Democratic Party was a bunch of Richard Nixon, Watergate, dirty trickster guys who came out of that group. And and Sharpton was staying at a hotel suite, $10,000 a night, with his feet up, enjoying champagne and stuff like this, while his whole campaign was a farce.
Well, when you saw him in the early days, and now, intermittently running into him later on, how big has his entourage grown? And, has it, you know what I mean? The way that the lifestyle that he, or the people that he traffics with now and the people that he hangs out with now, I'm sure is a big difference. Or was he always kind of flanked? Because the only reason I ask is because I've run into different politicians and stuff, and some of them travel with no security, some of them have a lot, some of them, you know what I mean? It's almost like a status thing sometimes. Yeah. And
when he came into the PI's office, he definitely had 4 big guys. That's the last time I saw him. I guess it was about 1984.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, and that's the last time I ran into Sharpton. And he definitely had some new guys that I had never met before that were sort of like off-duty cop types, big black off-duty cop types.
Yeah.
You know, like real security guys.
Right.
Or PIs or whatever. I didn't know who they were. But back in the days when I was in high school and I knew him, he would either be by himself or with one or two other regular guys, like church-type guys.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So how old would that have made him back then? Like around what time was that?
Yeah, I know. When I tell that story, a lot of people think that I'm saying that we went to high school together. You know? Because the way I say it.
You didn't?
No, I was in high school. He was an adult, you know, and a person to be respected. He already had a reputation at that time, you know, so you had to respect him. Him and guys like Reverend Herbert Daughtry and Hosea Williams, I think it was. These were all well-respected guys, you know, in the movement.
Do you think that he got cynical and he got compromised, or do you think he was ever legitimate? Because the way that he is now, he's like a cartoon of the way of his. If he had any credibility in the past, he certainly is like a cliche nowadays. You know what I mean? Like when you want to say somebody who stirs up trouble. You know what I mean? His name is synonymous with that. And I don't know if that's how it always was. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, you got to remember, too, now I was young and, naive, I guess you could say. And I thought he was legit. But I think other people even then had looked at him with a little shady eye. Because everyone, though, was involved in stuff. Everyone was involved with a little pot on the side. And all doing little stuff on the side. Everyone was. Right. And I think that's what happened, is everyone got caught. And but also, too, now I had another thing happen to me, too, is that later on, I guess it was around 1991, I owned a beeper and cellular phone company, and the guy who installed my phones, the car phones, his father worked for the Michael Jackson tour. And he worked for I think it was called the Thriller tour that was promoted by Al Sharpton and Michael Francis, who was the mafia guy from Jersey there, who testified against his own father. And now what happened is this guy, we were talking about Al Sharpton. And he goes, "Oh, Al Sharpton, man, he's a piece of shit, that guy." Oops, sorry, my language. He's a piece of crap. Well, it's on YouTube. We can say what we want.
Shiite, you can say.
Right, right. And I says, "What? Why do you say that?" He goes, "He covered up Michael Jackson molesting little boys." And I says, "What?" And he goes, "Yeah, that's right, man. On this tour, Michael Jackson got caught with little boys, and the promoters and the producers of this tour covered it up and paid everybody off." And I said, "Let's go to the press. Let's go to the media. Let's bust this wide open. It's a big story. We can sell it." And they go, "Oh, no way, man. These are bad guys. These are bad guys. All these are real bad guys." They didn't want to touch it, you know?
Well, you brought that up, Ed, and you were talking about the Geordie Chandler.
Right, this was way before Geordie Chandler ever came in.
I was just going to say, so this is even way before that.
Yeah.
Now, when that first happened, I saw that the whole media was coming down on Michael Jackson, and I pretty much went with it, and I figured, yeah, it must be true. You know, he paid off the Geordie Chandler to make it go away, as he said. So I figured, okay, it looks pretty incriminating. And then after he died, and there was some, mystery around that, and there was all kinds of chicanery, going on with the body, and just, I started to have my doubts about, what had been happening with him. But it seems like now, unfortunately, he really was, doing those things, and had a history, apparently, of it.
Yeah, I'm convinced. Well, also, too, I don't know, because the whole thing, too, you got to remember, when Michael Jackson was being accused of these things, he went and he hired Anthony Policano. He was a super tough guy, wiretapped everybody in town, and there were transcripts of Policano's negotiations with Geordie Chandler's father and Geordie Chandler's mother. I guess Policano recorded, but the transcripts were put up by Geordie Chandler's father, who's dead now, by the way.
That's right.
Yeah, and in these transcripts you can hear. Now the story with Geordie Chandler, you got to remember, is that Michael Jackson went to Geordie Chandler's house where he lived with his mother. The mother was divorced from the father. It was like a little 2-bedroom house. It was like 1,200 square foot house. And Michael Jackson moved into the bedroom of this little 12-year-old boy, and they stayed in that bedroom for like 90 days straight, where they never left, where the mother would bring their food, put the food on a plate in front of the door, leave it there, knock on the door would open, they'd bring the food in and put the empty plates out. I guess they went to the bathroom, I don't know what. But, but Michael Jackson lived with this little boy,
Right. And, you allude to that, and that's what that's what I forgot to say. What I was saying, what I was going to say was, and I think this might be relevant. When he died, before he died, he gave a few speeches that weren't big, televised. You had to kind of look for them. And he said, "I'm walking away owning half of Sony," and he said, "I've generated like $1 billion for Sony."
Yeah.
And Sony is a huge company. And he said, "I only owe them one more album, and I'll just, give them 2 pre-recorded songs and a greatest hits." And he really made a compelling case to make it seem like, he was saying it was a conspiracy, and, I can imagine him walking away owning that company. So I knew, his days were probably numbered. But I was on the fence about the whole, what had actually gone down with the boys. And, then you brought that up, and that is pretty creepy and pretty odd. No matter what he suffered in his childhood, it's just, that's unexcusable. It's just awful. But I think that's,
Yeah, because his brothers describe Michael getting molested as a boy. And also Michael Jackson talks about being in the room with his brothers were having sex with people and stuff like that. And,
right.
and his brothers, 2 of his brothers impregnated the same woman, and she was living,
Wow.
Oh, did you know about that? Like Randy and Jermaine, 2 of the brothers have kids with the same woman.
I didn't know that.
Oh, man, there's so much. And another one of them, too, drowned on their property, one of these brothers' wives. There's all kinds of stuff with that family. The father, Joe Jackson, stole like $3 million from a Korean church.
He's just like the
of
a piece of garbage. I mean, he's really a piece of work. He's like a cartoon character, like a nightmarish cartoon character.
Yeah.
He really is. He looks like a demon, He really does. Everything about him is just. He was leching after they were trying to do an interview after Michael died, and he's promoting some new band and that he had found. And as he's talking to the camera crew, like a mother and a daughter walk by, not good looking, anything special, and he literally turns his neck almost all the way around in the middle of the interview to check them out, and then says, "Hey, ladies, if you wanna," and gives them his business card, just like a total, lech, you know what I mean? Just
sure.
Like a total piece of garbage, and, it's like a day after his son's, untimely demise, and he's talking about, well, what I really want to talk about is the exciting upcoming, band that I'm promoting and managing, or whatever the hell he was doing.
Right.
And then he got the big truck and moved everything out of the house, right away. I mean, just the whole family so dysfunctional. Then the daughter, poor, I think Paris Jackson is her name.
Yeah.
Then tried to commit suicide. I mean, God knows what happened there. And so it was,
She's still locked up.
Yeah, right.
I didn't know that. She's still in a facility.
Well, if the
which
kind
I
of
didn't
money.
realize.
Go ahead, Aaron.
No, I'm sorry. I have a delay. My internet is really slow.
What I was going to say was, if the kind of money that he was talking about before he died is at stake, then I can see why they're all fighting, and clamoring over each other to get to it. I mean, when Kurt Cobain, this just came out recently, and now think about how much money the Beatles have generated. Kurt Cobain was a big shot with Nirvana in the 90s, yeah. I mean, they only made about 3 albums, and then there was this huge deal where they said that they had invested his money in some real estate, and he was worth $500 million. And she had Courtney Love had been suing the people that had mismanaged the money, but I was like, where in the hell did he get, $500 million. He was that was the end of that was the beginning of Napster and the end of, CD sales. You know what I mean? Even if you moved a lot of units, you didn't make that much money. I mean, I don't think Paul McCartney has that much money. And I was shocked to realize how much, she had lost or whatever. And it only came to light was because, there was something in dispute. Otherwise, you wouldn't even have heard it.
Well, who's that woman again? Courtney Love, yeah.
Courtney Love.
Yeah, well, she was fed LSD as a 5-year-old kid. There's all kinds of programming in her life, man. It goes on galore, but by her father and there's all stuff with forget that bunch.
Big time, yeah. Did you see...
Okay, a couple of things. Wait, getting back to the Beatles, though, man, about their money, because there's some interesting stuff about the Beatles didn't make as much money back then as everyone thinks. And there's a couple of really, really interesting things. Is that Paul McCartney was supposed to sign a contract, and this is why George Harrison's so pissed off at everybody all the time.
Uh-huh.
He was supposed to sign a contract one time, and instead, Jane Asher, whose brother Peter Asher was the manager of James Taylor, and Peter Asher was involved with the Process Church. And Jane Asher, you know who she was, right?
She was, tell us for the audience sake.
She was an actress who played Alice in Wonderland. Okay? And she scoops up Paul McCartney and takes him to Africa. He never signs this merchandising deal. They lose the deal. I think it was about a movie, a documentary that they were doing.
There was. That was that's right. That was the trip he went on. That's right.
But there was another one, man. There was another one where they were about to sign some papers, and John was with May Pang in a limousine, and Paul McCartney was about to sign this deal, and he was taken to Yoko Ono's apartment in Dakota and shown a hypnotism exhibit, an exhibition of hypnotism, and he didn't sign the deal the next day.
Wow. Well, you know what happened with them is everybody has a soft spot in their hearts for the Beatles because no matter what they were into with the occult and whatever, if you want to think Adorno wrote their music or that came out of Tavistock, whatever, everybody kind of has a soft spot for the Beatles. Everybody's favorite band is the Beatles, and they're very intriguing. And the thing is that I heard that they were kids, and when they were touring, everybody took care of everything for them. So when they finally made, they had reached a modicum of success, and they had kind of broken away from that, and they started the Apple, I think they called it, studio or production company. They didn't know how to even write their own checks and really manage their own affairs. So a lot of the stuff, they'd buy expensive paintings and stuff, and they would, just run through money.
Yeah.
And, they were kids. They didn't really know how to, they had been pampered a lot. And then what's his name? Epstein, who had, their manager, he died. He had the drug overdose. And
wasn't it suicide?
Something happened with him, and he was like the heart and soul of them, where he really took care of them. And he was, I think he was gay, and he really liked them. He really liked Paul, and he really liked John, and he took care of them. He loved them and took care of them. And then he passed, and when he did, it was like they went into disarray. And I don't know if that was before they went with the Maharishi and went into the transcendental stuff. You know how they had their different phases?
Sure.
I'm trying to think of when that was. I think the last time that they actually toured, where they came over here, they were the ones that gave rise to what we have as like modern day videos, because they didn't want to. It was so jarring to go all over the world to tour, to play, that they said, "Here, we'll give you a single of video of Paperback Writer and the other song that went with it, so that way, instead of having to tour, they had it on recording, and that was like the birth of video."
Hey, what do you think about the swap out of Paul McCartney?
That's what I was just going to say. Then there's some tease to that.
Yeah.
I mean, there really is.
Well, you know the story about Mal Evans, right? The McCartney's butler lived him all that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then he does a recording, a tape recording, where he calls up and says, "Hey, what do you call it? I'm about to."
He wrote the song.
Yeah, right. And he definitely co-wrote the song. That they gave him credit, but he never got paid for it. And he says, "Hey, we negotiated a great deal. I'm going to get this, but if anything happens to me, man," you know. And later on that night, he was shot by the cops, man. The cops went and shot him, and they said that he was waving an air rifle on his terrace. Right, and they shot him, man. The cops killed him.
Right, that's right.
Which, if you're Sir Paul McCartney, you can pull that off.
And very cryptically, when he divorced the last wife with the one leg.
Right. Well, you know her story, right?
No, go ahead. Heather Mills.
Heather Mills, right? She was one of Adnan Khashoggi's hookers.
Was she? Oh.
Yeah, man. And it came out. Yeah. Guys, she was one of Adnan Khashoggi's girls, and it came out live on TV. They showed McCartney the pictures and stuff like that, and he went, "What? Oh my God! Oh my God!" And I've never seen another word about it since.
Wow. And you know, she said in this, there's a thing called the Winged Beetle, I think it's called.
Yeah.
It's really weird. It's very creepy, actually.
I've seen it. I'm trying to get them to come on the show.
Oh, are you? Yeah. The way it's put together. And she said, if anything ever happens to me, she said, I have, she stumbled across a box or a crate, something with information in it. And she said, it's not drugs. She said, it's not what you think it is.
Right.
It pointed to that he was possibly phony. And what I was getting at when I said the last time that they toured in the 60s, when it was still in black and white, that was the last time, if they did switch, that you saw the real Paul. After that, then the rumors started to spread, and they went out and drove into the country, and he was supposedly with Linda at the cabin, and he was like, no, I'm very much alive, or something like that. But after that, it gets kind of dicey, and then that's when Sgt. Pepper comes out, and they start to do the backmasking, and they say,
right,
Paul's dead, he blew his mind out in a car, and all that stuff. And even if it was a joke, or it was some kind of symbolic thing, it's not funny. You know what I mean? So what were they doing? Were they, was it you know what I mean? It didn't make any sense. It wasn't like and they purposely said that there was codes. They even did it on the new album that they released, the most recent one, and they said if you can crack what the code is. So they like playing around with people and those things. But why would you make a joke about that? That he got decapitated.
Well, is there anything to that photo of the 2 or 3 McCartneys on the boat?
In the Yellow Submarine?
Have you seen it? No, there's a photo of all of them on a boat.
Yeah.
And there was 2 Pauls on there. Is there anything to that, or is that?
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Well, there's definitely.
Yeah.
There was when Paul was at his engagement party to Jane Asher, he was with Linda Eastman, and everyone said, "Well, how come he's not over there with Jane Asher?" And, well, that's his girlfriend.
Right.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
There was definitely a swap out. I don't know about the thing about him dying in a car in a cover-up. I believe it was the Process Church who swapped them out, and I believe it was the Process Church who killed John Lennon, and I believe that Yoko was a part of that from the start.
Mm-hmm.
No, she and even John Lennon, he did a bunch of winks and he said, "Oh, this Japanese witch."
Right.
He said the witch got him. You know what I mean? He'd always do these little kind of nods and little hints at those things. And she was the way they met. Everything was kind of there was a lot of high weirdness about the whole thing, and he was definitely under surveillance. G. Gordon Liddy, when they did that, pretty much mainstream. I think I saw an HBO documentary. They were like, "Yeah, we were following him, and we thought he was kind of subversive, and he came out in support of the Black Panthers. And the thing that was the reason why this is such an important case too is the only other singer that was really assassinated because they thought he was like a political threat was Bob Marley was shot.
Right.
And then he had an SS doctor that was treating him for his cancer, and he didn't know. The guy was an SS doctor, and he died. But they said we had heard of politicians being killed. We had heard of other people, but never a musician. So,
the same day that Bob Marley was shot, he had an appointment with a documentary filmmaker who was the son of the director of the CIA. The same guy lived next door to this. I forget his name. Is either Colby or Colson. I forget which one it is. I think it's Colby.
Right.
The son of the CIA director had an appointment with Marley that day. The same guy. Guess who he is? He lived next door to OJ's wife, Nicole Simpson.
That's what I was going to, when you were talking about OJ, I remember, I thought you mentioned that, and you said they had a neighbor that
he lived next door, and when OJ Simpson is on 911 and he's flipping out because she was having sex with somebody, and he was and she's on the 911 call, and he's screaming, "Who's there? Keith Zlomwich, Keith, blah, 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 blah." Who was hiding in the closet? It was that CIA guy. Wow.
See, it's small world.
Never talked about. And also, too, the reason why I found out about that originally is because he had in front of his house, he didn't want the press and the media that was out in front of Nicole's house and stuff, he didn't want them parking in front of his house, so they had cones out in front of his house, and no one dared park in front of this guy's house. They're parking on everybody else's lawns, but this guy they wouldn't go near. So
Well, did you see, Ed? He just had his other appeal for the other thing, and he got shot down.
Well, when he did that the hearing about his ineffective counsel, I saw the whole thing live on TV here locally, and that guy Yale Galanter did a horrible job defending OJ. And
right.
And it was actually one of my lawyers, Ozzy Fumo, who represented OJ in that hearing.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I figured. I figured he must have had horrible counsel because, what did he really do? I mean, he was trying to get his stuff back. I mean, whatever you think about the guy and whatever he did do in the past, this case is this case.
Well, Yale Galanter comes off looking really, really bad in that hearing, man, where he's basically throwing OJ under the bus. There's even some allegations that he was involved and was in a white SUV. He had dinner with OJ the night before this robbery, and that he was advising him on the phone and stuff what was all going on. So there's a whole bunch of stuff with Yale Galanter's involvement. But he pretty much admits, they gave me $1 million and I spent $100,000 on experts and witnesses. They weren't even interviewing people.
Wow.
He kept all the money.
It's funny. My late mom, she was so involved in the OJ case because she was going through chemo at the time, and so she was watching it every day, just like everybody was. It was like a phenomenon. It was the trial of the century. Since it was the biggest trial probably since the Lindbergh, case with the baby, and she always said to me, the time frame, to get rid of all of the evidence, and to not have a scratch on them and kill the two people, it seemed fishy. It was like there had to be another person, or the way they laid it out, it just seemed like he would have to be pretty quick. And I don't know. I didn't follow it closely.
There's so much in that case. One of the things is, OJ went and played golf with Bill Clinton about 2 weeks before the murders. Uh-huh. And at the time, who was working for Bill Clinton? Anthony Pellicano. Anthony Pellicano was digging up dirt on Monica Lewinsky. Hey, you're right. There are two Paul McCartneys in this picture on the boat. Yeah, that's pretty clear. Yeah. But then Pellicano. Oh my God, he has so much involvement in everything, man.
Doesn't he?
Oh my God. Now what happened was, there was another guy, Don Simpson, who was a movie producer, who was a big coke addict and had all the Heidi Fleiss girls and stuff like that, Top Gun, right?
Top Gun and Days of Thunder, I think.
Right. He has a house guest in his home. The house guest dies of an overdose. He doesn't call the cops. He calls up Anthony Pellicano. Pellicano comes. This is documented. Pellicano comes down there and cleans up the crime scene before they call the cops. Who is the first officer to arrive at the scene?
Oh, Furman?
Mark Furman.
No way.
Which means that Pelicano did not call. Yeah, it wasn't two uniformed cops showing up. Pelicano picked up the phone and called up someone who he knew to come down and be the responding officer. Okay? Now Pelicano comes up later on in the transcripts, too. Remember all those sidebars at the O.J. hearing?
Right.
You can get those transcripts and you can read them. And there's one time when Pelicano's name comes up, and everybody, Chris Darden, everybody, and Marsha Clark, and the defense lawyers, I don't want to talk about Pelicano. I don't want to talk about Pelicano. I'll imagine they're all shitting a brick when the name Pelicano comes up. Yeah.
Now, when you were doing your thing, Ed, back then, was that when you were in your prime of the, your detective work? Did you offer any support in that case, or were you just, were you tangentially involved in any sort of way?
During OJ, I wasn't in the PI business at all. I had a B-plus cell phone company in New York City. I was totally out of the PI business back in those days.
Oh. Yeah, because that would have been something. That probably, so many people have posited so many different theories with it. It's crazy. But I really do believe it was a drug thing. They were definitely involved with that. There were pictures of Nicole with, people in that subculture. And, it just was, it looked like a hit. It was kind of sloppy the way it was done. And the only thing I was thinking was that, the time frame that they presented, for the prosecution presented, was kind of like short, for him to, get rid of all the evidence and get home and everything. But it doesn't mean that, it doesn't mean I'm right. I'm just, the way that they presented it, I thought was odd.
Yeah. Well, there's a whole bunch of there's so many connections to the Church of Scientology in that case, and it's just incredible.
It seems like the process in the Church of Scientology, kind of, run through a lot of these, more bizarre cases, whether it's John Lennon, what have you, Manson, all of them. And it started, wouldn't you say, kind of like in the 60s, it was that trial, it was like a show trial, that Manson case. And then it's like everything was tainted from that whole era.
Yeah, well, a couple of the cops who showed up at Manson were also the OJ cops, Dylan Van Adder.
Oh boy.
Yeah, they were at OJ too. They were at Manson as well. But the connections with the Scientology, because Marsha Clark was Scientologist.
I know that.
I didn't know that.
So was Greta. Marsha Clark went to high school with my sister on Staten Island. Okay. I can say that. I know everybody. But one of the things
you're like Forrest Gump, Ed.
I know, I really am. And dude, there was a time I stopped answering the phone. I didn't even, like in 1990, I stopped answering the phone for like 10 years. But anyway, what do you call it? Marsha Clark, her ex-husband, was at a weekly poker game with O.J. Simpson. Every week they played poker together, and he owed O.J. money at the time of the murders.
Wow.
Marsha Clark, their Scientologist pastor, shot that guy.
Oh, my God.
The pastor that married her at her second shot her ex-husband. Okay?
Well, from your research and from your affiliations and everything with Scientology, because I remember, I've seen some tapes when L. Ron Hubbard was still alive.
Yeah.
And, I got to hear him speak, and he was out there.
Yeah.
What do you think? Now, they did have a mission statement to recruit celebrities, and I think their celebrity section is a little bit different than their, regular, whatever you would call their body of people. I think they have a celebrity center, and then they have their, everyday people. And then, of course, they do have the Sea Org, which is their elite branch. But, I mean, like, what is your thoughts with them and how they operate? Like, without slandering the whole church, just, I mean, like, what is your impression of, like, what they...
Okay. They tried to recruit me twice. One time, it was at a time when I was in a really desperate time in my life, and someone was inserted into my life, for sure. I'm sure of it. And tried to recruit me not into just Scientology, but also into the Freemasons.
Really?
Oh yeah, and often to make me a member of the Freemasons. And I declined. It was right after I got saved. It was like right after I got saved, like a month after I got saved.
Wow.
It was September 9th. And then later on, when I had the beeper company, again, Scientologists tried to infiltrate into my business. People that were Scientologists were trying to apply for jobs with us and stuff like that. Definitely with an agenda.
Well, do you think they're kind of like, you know how the Masons, now I have a half-brother who's a Mormon, and I'm going to say positive things in this respect. Like Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, Masons, this Jewish neighborhood that I live in, they're Hasidic. They kind of take care of each other, you know,
yeah.
Like when they go to the hospital, in business, you know, they look out for each other. And a lot of times what people do is they'll join with these different groups and churches for those benefits, almost more than the dogma. They'll join up because it gives them some sort of stability in the community. And also, if you're not one, like a Mason or someone, and you try to open up a business there,
right.
They won't patronize your place of business. So you kind of have to sometimes join, you know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying. I was just telling my daughter about this the other day, because the Hasidics, they'll move into a neighborhood, there'll be a temple there, you know, and they'll start moving in. They'll take over. They'll buy up all the property, the rental property. Yeah, they take over the businesses, and they'll take over.
Yeah. Last holdout.
Yeah, right. And some of it is, you're right, like with, you know, you gotta be a Mormon, you gotta be a Freemason, whatever. There's that surface level. But I think, there's others. There's a whole other level, man, where this, and the way they went in and took over the OJ trial, you know, Greta Van Susteren, she's Scientology as well.
I was just going to say, what is her deal?
And she came out of that, and all the people who rose out of that to prominence, you know, are all the Scientologists who came out of that and got big careers.
You were saying something about, and this I know a lot of people will find interesting, because she's either loved or hated, is Nancy Grace.
Right.
And was she not, I'm going to say this, so this is on me. Was she not like, what would the word be in court? When she was a prosecutor, I'm right. Was she not fabricating evidence?
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's public record, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think she got disbarred over that.
Now, doesn't she have you were alluding to, she was a little unstable?
We might have talked about this off the air. The story that I heard was that when she was doing that show with Cochran, Johnny Cochran.
Okay.
Was that she flipped out one night and cut all her hair off.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, out of the blue. And you got to understand is I've been not Johnny Cochran specifically, but other people involved with the Michael Jackson's cases and stuff like that. I've been referred work by these people, as colleagues, where they recommended my work. I did a lot of work in the Lacey Peterson case.
You did?
Yeah, I did a lot. It was on the outskirts of it. There was some internet defamation that was going on, and I was hired for that. There was a situation with a book was published, and they were actually making copies of the book and posting it on the internet, and I tracked down the people who did that. So I became known. I was known amongst that group as a guy who could trace emails and do internet investigations, and I was referred work afterwards.
Oh, and that was with Garagos, right?
Yeah, he was one of the lawyers.
That's right. Yeah, that was quite a case that really touched the nerve. They said that it was amazing because even through the whole Iraq War, it never left the headlines.
Lacey Peterson?
Yeah, it must have struck a primal nerve where, you know, a husband and a wife that seemingly have everything. They're a good-looking couple. You know, on the surface, everything looks good. They have a nice family, you know, all this stuff. And then for the husband to just kill his wife.
Okay.
But you were saying, Ed, one time, and you made a good point, that people like to talk to, you know, private detectives more than they'll open up more than they will to cops for different reasons. Like sometimes it benefits to be a police officer when you're trying to get to the bottom of something, but then there's other times when, they feel like they're talking to because it's off the record, or
right.
you know what I mean. They feel like they can kind of be a little bit more loose-lipped, and they'll tell you stuff that they maybe wouldn't say.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You were alluding to something like along those lines once.
Yeah, because especially with my New York accent, I can kind of put it on a little heavier, and I'll we'll just be chatting with somebody. Oh yeah, and I had nightclub business, and all that kind of stuff. And they kind of think, well, okay, I'm dealing with another criminal. This guy's just as shady as I am. We could talk off the record, and you just let them talk, man. And then there's these little things, there's little triggers you can give people. Hey, just tell me the truth. Don't worry about it. Just don't lie to me. And little triggers like that, and it sits in their head, man, and they spill everything.
Wow. Well, that's the other thing too with human nature is people want to, even like a lot of times after they get caught, like Ted Bundy and stuff, they want to tell the story. A lot of times people, they want to either brag or let the it's like that old saying. I think Benjamin Franklin said it. He said the only way that three people can keep a secret is if two are dead. You know what I mean? People by nature kind of want to tell the actual real story. They
there
feel
are no secrets.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, once you tell one person, it's out there forever. And so yeah. Like, even when I tell you guys stuff, I know it's stuff that I don't care if it goes out. Yeah.
No, we cover so many different things. I forget afterwards then. You know what I mean? It all gets jumbled together. So yeah. My problem is I have to take a step back sometimes because that's what happens. It all gets jumbled together and I forget where I heard what, and then I have to try to piece it back together. So it's almost like you have to do the things case by case and sort of stay on topic, or it'll get all mixed up in there, and then you'll forget, you'll mix your facts up, and that's the one thing. That's the one thing too, is that when you do have a guest on, and I like the last guest, is that he didn't speculate too much. He pretty much stuck with what he pretty much could prove, or that he thought he was pretty certain of. Sometimes people will go an extra mile and kind of
exactly.
say, well, yeah, speculate, and it could be true. You don't know, so you kind of have to stick with what you can prove, and then that way you can piece it together better.
Well, this guy did a great documentary.
Yeah, now I'm really interested to check it out because it seemed like he was holding back a little. I don't know, maybe that was just me. It seemed like he was kind of like.
It's what I find, what I take away from this guy the most interesting to me is how he does not mention Paul Gorish at all.
Right.
And which is very odd to me, man. And because to me that guy, there's just so much with him.
Yeah. Well, when you do your interviews, do you tell them ahead of time, what you basically want to cover, or do you just kind of like?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. With this guy, we didn't go into much in advance.
Right.
But a guy like Jim Rothstein, you get on the phone with him, you have so much in common. You're just talking about your stuff off the cuff, and then it's hard to remember what you talked off the air,
Yeah.
What you talked on the air.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, that interview was one for the books, and it was like encompassed everything almost. It was just.
Well, he has a ton more to talk about, man.
Oh, God.
With Watergate and JFK assassination, he arrested Sturgis. There's a lot of stuff, man.
Jeez.
Yeah, no, he's coming back.
Yeah, and people like that, it would be good to get them to do an interview and get it recorded, while they're around and can, relay that information.
So what do you think about the way I got the Mark David Chapman story out? Do you think I got it all out correctly, or probably not? Right?
Oh yeah, no. I think you hit all the high points, and I think, like I said, the reason why it was so important was because they didn't. Before that, like they said, I think it was George Harrison who said it. They were not killing musicians.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were killing political people, and they were like, John Lennon was really that big of a threat? Well, yeah, because people don't trust the so-called, leaders and things. They actually look up to celebrities. They look up to, counterculture types of heroes, authors, and people like that. And those people have a lot of power. And if they ever threw that power behind a movement, and let's say they had like a few million fans, and just a quarter of them listened, you know what I mean? That would be a huge block of people to they have influence. So it would make a lot of sense for them to follow him and keep an eye on what he was doing and find him threatening and maybe, assassinate him. There'd be, I could really see that. And then you saw the outpouring of love that he still gets to this day. And, he wasn't even American, and he came here and kind of adopted this as his, second home. And, he was universally loved. So, that was a big story. I don't think there'll ever be a star of that magnitude because of the timing of how the Beatles came around. There were 3 channels. There was the Ed Sullivan Show. You went on there, and
right.
You know what I mean? There will never be a time like that.
Well, also, music from that era is today it's just so programmed and so controlled and test marketed. Back then it was more soul and heart and soul to music.
Right. That's true too. That's right.
Hey, Ann, who's that guy we're trying to get? The Dave McGowan?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I need to. Yeah, we need to get that guy.
I know, man.
Is there any other way we could?
Well,
did you find anything else on him? Is there another contact for him? Because, I can email him again. But
McGowan's such a common name. There's going to be 100 people with their phone number.
That's true.
He seems like a pretty amenable guy to interviews, like if, from the ones that I've heard, he's pretty laid back,
yeah.
And he knows all about Laurel Canyon and all about that stuff, and, he seems like, if you could get a hold of him, that he'd be happy to,
we emailed him,
Yeah.
I'll do it again.
You know who said he didn't want to come on?
I have a different email address.
Yeah, Alex Constantine said he didn't want to come on.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he said that he was too nervous. He doesn't like to do radio.
Oh.
Yeah, we got to talk to him, though.
He had a bad experience.
Well, I don't blame some of the people. Now that you're here, behind the scenes, it's different, Then once you find out, you never know. And then, in this day and age, you got to be careful, I guess. But no, that would be a great interview if.
Yeah. Then we have that guy Dennis Hopsinger, the guy who's the 9/11 guy with those flight schools down there in Florida.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's good.